Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking about the PlayStation 6. We actually have official information about the PlayStation 6, when it's expected to release, as well as some of the technology that's going to be featured inside of the PS6. And this comes from the lead architect of Sony's next generation console, that being Mark Cerny. For those of you who are unaware or maybe forgot, there was a very significant partnership and collaboration announced when Mark Cerny was discussing the PS5 Pro called Project Amethyst. Essentially, what Project Amethyst is Mark Cerny trying to work with AMD and their engineers to innovate on the hardware side of things, obviously with GPUs and CPUs and different technology that will inevitably benefit AMD, but will also benefit Sony and all of their future hardware, including the PlayStation 6 home console and the PlayStation 6 handheld. And so today there was about an 8 to 9 minute video released where Mark Cerny was talking with the lead of AMD, the lead engineer of AMD, and revealing some of the features that are actually going to be inside of the PlayStation 6. Now, he doesn't explicitly state that these will be in the PS6, but he does say towards the end of the conversation that he's excited to implement these features into a future console. So obviously he's talking about the PS6, but the big thing here that a lot of people are going to want to know is, did Mark Cerny talk about the time frame for the PlayStation 6? Did he give us any idea of when this console is going to come out? And he did. He said, quote, "in a few years' time."
Overall, it's of course still very early days for these technologies. They only exist in simulation right now, but the results are quite promising, and I'm really excited about bringing them to a future console in a few years' time.
So obviously he's not giving a definitive date, but every leak we've gotten so far in terms of the PlayStation 6 APU and when it's expected to begin mass production, we are looking at a holiday 2027 release. Now, things could change, of course, but I wanted to kick it off with that because Mark Cerny did straight up acknowledge that he's going to be putting the technology they're revealing today into a future console, and that future console, the PS6, will be out in a few years' time. So the first thing that they talk about are neural arrays. And to kind of break this down for you guys in the most simplified way I possibly can, essentially what Mark Cerny and AMD have done here is they are combining all of the compute units that will be in the GPU to create what they're calling a neural array. And this is a direct quote from Mark Cerny. He says, "Neural arrays will allow us to process a large chunk of the screen in one go. And the efficiencies that come from that are going to be a game changer as we begin to develop the next generation of upscaling and denoising technologies together." End quote. So essentially what he's referring to here is the true next generation of upscaling, which will probably be the PS6 version of PSSR. And if you listen to the way that they discuss this, it does sound like this may actually be a very significant breakthrough. We know how impressive a lot of upscaling technology is now, and the massive improvements that have been made even in just the last couple of years. But it sounds like what they've done here is taking it truly to the next level. Now, obviously, they haven't demonstrated this yet. They haven't shown it off. They're just talking about it. So we have to be a little bit cautious. But it sounds very promising, and I have no doubt that this technology, Mark Cerny flat out said it himself, will be featured in the PlayStation 6. But the second main thing that they discussed here is what they're calling AMD's new Radiance cores. And there's another quote here from Mark Cerny, and he says there's a significant speed boost that comes from putting the traversal logic in hardware, and a further boost that comes from having that hardware operate independently from the shader cores. On top of this, performance increases. There's other features in the works too, such as flexible and efficient data structures for the geometry being ray traced. Now, what he's really referring to here when it comes to these Radiance cores is the fact that these cores are basically going to be dedicated to handling ray and path tracing. And he's just kind of talking here about how that's going to free up a lot of space for, bigger performance gains and improvements in other areas of games. A lot of times when we talk about ray tracing, especially path tracing, we talk about how expensive it is and how it's really difficult for developers to find that perfect balance of, how much ray tracing should we implement? Is path tracing even possible? Is it going to tank the frame rate? How much are we going to have to scale the graphics down and kind of hold it back? He's basically saying here that these Radiance cores are going to solve that problem and basically take on that workload so the GPU, the CPU, and everything else can just kind of focus on doing what it needs to do. And so, as you can kind of see here, he's basically outlining what we're going to be hearing about with the PlayStation 6. These are going to be two of the biggest features that are going to, I would say, showcase the major strides in improvements and performance gains that we can expect with the PS6, where he's basically telling you, look, we are working on a breakthrough in upscaling technology that will be implemented into the PlayStation 6, as well as a breakthrough in ray tracing and path tracing, and finding a more efficient way, a more practical way to implement it into a next gen console as well as next generation GPUs, to the point where it's not going to be something that people end up kind of like sighing over. You know what I mean? That's kind of a thing that happened with ray tracing and path tracing, where it's very cool, but when you see just how expensive it is and how taxing it is, and how much you have to kind of sacrifice to get that type of lighting, it feels to a lot of people like, I just prefer higher frame rates, right? Higher resolutions, higher frame rates. You can keep the ray and path tracing. Seems like what they're working on here with AMD is trying to solve that problem, where can we give you the best of all worlds? So yes, this is what was revealed today, and again, it was quite surprising because it just kind of came out of nowhere, and it sounds very exciting. Mark Cerny does say that all of these things that they're revealing and the technologies and breakthroughs they're talking about right now are still just in the simulation phase. They're not, they're not fully implemented yet, but everything they're seeing is looking very, very promising, and they did talk previously about how they're making better progress than they anticipated by this point in time. Like, they're actually moving ahead quicker. So I imagine we're going to be hearing more from Mark Cerny and AMD in the coming months, especially going into 2026. We know there's still a big PS5 Pro PSSR update that is set to come. So maybe some of what he's saying here will actually be implemented into the PS5 Pro as well. It's hard to determine. But yes, make no mistake, the bulk of what we're hearing is setting us up for the PlayStation 6. And the final thing I want to say here is this technology is actually going to be a massive game changer for the PlayStation 6 handheld. The big thing about the PlayStation 6 handheld is the APU and the specifications of it leaked out. And what we have determined based on those leaked specs is that this thing is slightly, on paper, keywords on paper, less powerful than a base PS5. So obviously this makes people kind of worried, being like, whoa, is this thing even going to be worth it? Is this going to be attached to the PS6? What does this mean for game development? Keep in mind, everything that Mark Cerny is going over here is going to be implemented into the PlayStation 6 handheld. And when we got these leaks regarding the handheld, it was emphasized that there is going to be cutting edge technology put into these devices, into this handheld device. And so you simply cannot assume to know what games are going to look like and how they're going to run on this handheld based on the on-paper specifications alone. In fact, half of what Mark Cerny talked about here is going to try to find different ways to create better results in terms of visual fidelity, performance, lighting, all that good stuff, without needing to brute force their way. I think that's the term he actually used, brute force. They're not just going to make it as specced up and as beefed up as they possibly can, because that's going to drive the cost up. That's going to make it very expensive. This is Mark Cerny doing what he does best in collaboration with, AMD, who's absolutely massive and making huge strides of improvement as well. I think they're cooking. I think we have a lot to look forward to. That's just me. But guys, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I'll be really interested to see what you have to say. Be sure to leave the video a like if you enjoyed it or found it informative. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Hit the bell notification icon and feel free to share this video out on top of all that. But until next time, guys, take care.